So, while the intention of this program is not to help you decide whether or not you're going to leave the Mormon church, you should have already made that decision and be 100% comfortable and confident in that decision. I do want to share my story because I think it helps to find similarities in other people's struggles. Um, so, I want to tell you why I left the Mormon church. I was raised in a very strict Mormon household. My father worked for CES, which was the church business that ran seminary and institute programs. So when I say we were in a strict household, we were in a strict household. Like Coke was not allowed even in the front door, right? Like nowhere in the house. The Sunday Sabbath day was, we couldn't even go swimming. We couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't go outside and play with friends in the neighborhood. And so I was fully immersed from the moment I was born in the Mormon church. And, it was all I knew, right? I have had and have lovely parents. They're good people, they have good hearts. I have nothing horrible to say about the way I was raised. Um, Looking back now, in hindsight, after making the decision to leave the church, I always had these little inklings or little things that just didn't sit right with me from the time I was a kid. Messages being shared in church that made me go, is that right? Yeah, I think I really questioned things from a young age, but I was always told, don't doubt, just have faith. The Lord works in mysterious ways. It will be explained to you in the celestial kingdom, all those things. So I wasn't really allowed to question. And if I did question, it was because I didn't have enough faith. I also didn't have a lot of choice in my life of my trajectory, where I was going in my future. When I graduated from high school, I only applied to BYU in Provo and BYU Hawaii. I didn't even entertain going to a non Mormon school. Um, I ended up getting into both schools with a scholarship to BYU Hawaii, but felt like my father would be more proud of me if I went to the BYU, the one that was hard to get into. So anyway, went to BYU, had a horrible experience. That's something for a whole other video. Um, but just felt like I think the indoctrination was so strong in me that even though I didn't resonate with any other Mormons, I just felt like I was different, right? I knew better than them. I was raised stronger than them. I could rise above the culture of the Mormon church and I could just dive into the doctrine of the Mormon church. Um, and there was always in the back of my mind, like, wanting to get approval from my father and do something that he would think would be the right thing to do. Um, anyway, so I got married young. I went to BYU. I got married young. I met my husband at BYU. He was not a student at BYU, but we got married young. We started having kids right away. So I was like 2 weeks shy of my 21st birthday when we got married, and I was 22 when I gave birth to our oldest child. And so I was in it. I was in it. I was the stay at home mom. My husband was finishing up school to be a teacher and, going to church, doing all the Mormon things, being the great housekeeper and the cook and all of that. Um, Fast forward a little bit, we had 3 kids, uh, and I was depressed, like really depressed. I was anxious all the time. I was short tempered. I was irritable. And it was because I had lost myself. I had spent so much of my time and energy becoming what the Lord wanted me to be and what the proclamation on the family said that I should be. But it was not what I wanted to be. But I spent so many years building this family and doing what I was told that I should be doing that I didn't even know what my desires were anymore. I didn't even know what my strengths were. I was just doing what the cookie cutter Mormon housewife does. And I was miserable. So I ended up going back to school because I had dropped out from BYU. That's again, a whole other story. Um, and we were living in Boise, Idaho at the time. So I went back to school. I got my teaching degree to become a high school teacher. And I felt alive again. I felt like, wow, I am smart. I am successful. I do have passions and interests outside of being a Mormon housewife. And I began to just start to kind of look around. And I began noticing all the times that I felt uncomfortable at church. I began noticing all the teachings and parts of the church that weren't sitting right with me, that weren't comfortable. I started to step away as I grew into my independence and my sense of self outside of being a stay-at-home mom. I realized slowly that this was not a church for me. That the church was teaching things that I was actually really against. And it was very subtle, right? There's a lot of subtle messages in the church. They're not direct, they're very subtle. But I started to notice the things that didn't sit well with me. So I had spent some times not going to church. Then I would go back to church after speaking with my parents and feeling very guilty that I wasn't going to church. And then sometime out of the church. And so it kind of went back and forth for a while. Um, Then we moved overseas. We moved out of the country to work in an international private school. And my time outside of the country and outside of the Mormon culture really helped me to open my eyes to other ways of life and other religions. And we had spent some time traveling. And I had been through Europe before as a younger kid, and I started remembering that, like, I would go into these beautiful churches in Europe and Catholic cathedrals and whatever, and they felt calm and peaceful and not dissimilar to the feelings that I used to feel at church when I was younger or in the temple when I was younger. And then we spent some time in India, and we were going to these Hindu temples, and the people were so devout and so convicted in their faith. And it made me go, wait a second. I was always told that Mormons had the one true faith, and we were the most convicted, and we were the most dedicated to God. But I was watching these other people in other religions in a lot of ways looking more dedicated and more convicted than I was, or than that other Mormons were that I knew. And so I felt a little confused, and it made me start to question even more. Then I think it was like 2015, um, the Mormon church came out with a statement about children of gay parents, that the children were also considered apostates. If they had gay parents, the children would be considered apostates of the church and would not be allowed to be baptized. And I was just like, that one really floored me. I thought we had been taught that, the article of faith were not responsible for Adam's transgression, right? So we were only responsible for our own sins, not for someone else's. Well, then this new statement by the church was a direct contradiction to that. You are now You're saying that homosexuality is wrong and a sin, but you're passing that sin on to the children. And just as the church came out with this statement, it was really controversial, if you remember this time. My father, the all-knowing, sent out an email, because he loves communicating by email, sent out an email to his kids. There's 5 of us. I'm one of 5. Talking about this statement by the church, and it's coming from a place of love. And I just remember literally wanting to throw up. And in that moment, I'd been questioning the church for 10 plus years at this point. In that moment, I stood up and I said, I am not Mormon. I finally, like a switch was flipped in my brain. I finally could say, this is not me. I am not Mormon. And just being able to say those words was so powerful for me. In that moment, it was like I took a stand and my life could now begin again.